All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Women's Empowered Podcast, and I am here with Care from Birthing Center, and you're in California?
Birth Education Center in San Diego.
There we go. All right, so what do you do there? What is Birth Education Center?
That's a big loaded question. For the most part, we do birth education. We teach hypnobirthing as our main series, and we do newborn care, class on VBAC, breastfeeding, CPR, all of your basic classes. And then we have some release and relax classes for birthing families or birthing parent to bond with their baby. I do that the second Friday of every month. And we hold different classes in the community depending on what they need. I'm also an authentic relating facilitator and an erotic blueprint coach and a professional cuddler. So the center is used for a lot of different things, but it all boils down to connection.
That's so awesome. Connection is such a huge thing. Like, it's being brought out in so many different ways. Like, in my podcast, I've found so many different ways and so many different people that like explain how connection is such a big deal. Like, we're a tribe kind of people. Like, it's definitely a huge thing.
Well, and we're so disconnected that we crave connection. So I found that as I added more kinds of facilitations and more circles, everybody needs it. Doesn't matter your gender, doesn't matter your race, religion, creed, whatever. Everybody craves connection, and we're so much more alike than we're not alike. That when we find the similarities, we actually can kind of come to grow, and that's how we need to raise these babies.
Yes, absolutely. And connection can bring so much more. Like, there's all this anger and hate out there, and it's important to teach the babies how to connect. Like, absolutely, I love the work you're doing. Can you tell us more about hypnobirth? That's an interesting topic.
Yeah, so actually, that's how all of this came to be. I am a very medical person. I love drugs, medical drugs, morphine, and all the things. And we'd had 6 miscarriages, and so I just didn't assume we'd ever have a baby. We ended up adopting a 5-year-old who was 8 by the time we adopted her, and we kind of got the house, got the dog, and started a life. And I came to be pregnant with Finley, and it was unexpected. So since I'd had so many miscarriages, I was with a high risk doctor at a big local hospital. And at one of my early visits, I was probably 20 weeks. She looked at my drug history and she said, "Oh, you're actually allergic to everything that goes in the epidural. So what kind of natural childbirth are you going to do?" And I had never considered it, would never consider it, and almost fainted and said, I'm doing medication. Like, I'm good with morphine. Can you just give me morphine? And she's like, the amount we'd have to give you would kill you. I'm like, I'm willing to take that chance. Because I literally thought I would be numb from the head down. I didn't think I don't like pain, as nobody does, but I just didn't, there's no way I could handle it. And she reassured me that I could, and that's what I'd have to do. So I better go find a class. And I started crying in her office at that point, and I cried for 2 solid weeks. My niece-in-law had had 2 hypnobirthing babies and sent me the book and told me that it was awesome and that, they just fell out and you can do it. It's deep relaxation and breathing. And I am not that kind of a person. I'm not a yogi. I eat meat. I have a big carbon footprint. And I thought there's no way that that's going to work for me. And I didn't have a choice because, my mom thought I was going to be a statistic and die in childbirth. My husband didn't think I could do it. And I didn't either. But I didn't have a choice. So I started reading the hypnobirthing book, the Marie Mongan method. And about page 125, there was a shift that clicked in my brain that women have done this for centuries, hundreds of thousands of years since have been here on the planet. And there's a way to do it. We just may have lost the skills, and I need to start learning to trust. I kept reading the book. I told my husband what I was going to be doing, and he laughed, and so did my mom. So I thought, well, mom's not coming to the birth. That's easy. And I ended up shifting from, I had a, we hired a hypnobirthing instructor. Hypnobirthing, just to give you a little background, is deep relaxation, self-hypnosis. There's some tracks that you listen to get your mind and body connected to trust, stay relaxed and calm, and allow your body as a mammal to do what it's supposed to do. As mammals, our minds get in the way and we start thinking fight or flight of what's going on. And that pulls us out of what our body is already moving forward and doing. So the hypnobirthing gives you the tools and skills to allow your body to behave like a mammal, like a cow, like a monkey, like, cat on the bed. So that's what I was practicing. And my birth plan was really too long. And I called the charge nurse at the local hospital that I was going to be birthing at. And as I started to read everything to her, she said, no, nope, that's against policy. Nope, you can't do that. Oh, no, you can't eat and drink. Nope, you'll be connected to the monitors the whole time. And granted, this was 12 years ago. A lot has changed in San Diego since then. We have an amazing birth community now. But there were a lot of no's I heard. And she stepped away from the desk for a minute and said, it sounds like you want to birth at a birth center. And I'm like, no, I don't. I want to birth at a hospital. And she said, well, everything you've just told me, my daughter and I went and had at Best Start Birth Center, and it was amazing. And she had a water birth, and the midwives were amazing. And I heard a couple things there. Midwives to me were witches, and that was like super hippie, and I was not into that. And I heard water birth, which I'd never heard of before, and that totally intrigued me because I'm a water freak. And she said, just go check it out and see what you think. And when I hung up the phone, my first thought was, if a charge nurse who could have any doc, any of her friends help deliver the baby, her grandbaby, left this hospital, I need to take that seriously. And I called Best Start. Somehow they were in network. I walked in, as soon as my feet hit those wood floors, I was like, oh, I'm going to have my baby here. And it was just that extra little step that kind of got me into trusting, because I was leaving the establishment, which I trusted and really liked, and I'm very comfortable in hospitals, to do something more natural and more normal, and what we used to do a million years ago and what people do all over the world. And I had an amazing labor. It was intense at the end, but I wouldn't say it was painful. It was 6 hours start to finish. She came on day 42 of the 42-week process, and it was magic. And the thing that happened in that birth was calm and peaceful and connected. And I knew was getting ready to do a big shift, but I didn't know exactly what. One thing that we weren't prepared for was that Finley was born with special needs. And it was actually a birth thing that happened to her. And I'm grateful that I didn't know, because I would have baked her in terror and worry the whole time, which would affect her personality. And I did not do that. But the hypnobirthing techniques allowed me to transfer into a hospital. We had an amazing children's hospital here in San Diego. Ask questions of the providers, be an active participant. I was not dictated to, because I actually knew how to ask and have conversations, and treat humans like humans instead of doctors. And they treated me the same way. And we built a beautiful relationship over those 8 days, even though she was on hospice as she came home and was not expected to live more than 24 hours. She did live, and it shifted our whole lives. I felt so powerful and so connected in my birth. And it was the first time in my life that I'd ever felt that way from head to toe. And I felt like nobody tells women who they really are, and what power we have in our bodies, and how capable we are of actually asking questions and making decisions for ourselves, for our own health care, and that we don't need to be part of a conveyor belt process. And even though Finley has special needs, has cerebral palsy, she's a quadriplegic, she doesn't walk, she doesn't talk, she giggles, she loves hip hop, she's amazing. And it was her birth that showed me, no matter what kind of birth and what kind of circumstances, you always have a choice, and you always have the tools built into your body in order to facilitate the change that you need in your life. And it shifted me into birth work. Within 9 months, I had trained to be a birth doula one weekend. The next weekend, I went to the hypnobirthing conclave and became a hypnobirthing educator. And a week later, I was teaching. And that was 11 and a half years ago. So hypnobirthing really had the tools that I needed to start the foundation of not only healing my past and my childhood and my marriage and all of that, but to become a business person and somebody that has tapped into what she's supposed to do here on the planet.
That's absolutely amazing. And it all started with something so simple.
Well, I don't know if birth is simple, but it can be. We
It
make it
started with a
complicated.
simple suggestion from, it started with not being able to take the drugs, and then did you say your sister-in-law or
Niece.
niece, niece recommended those books, and that goes back to like the community we are talking before the podcast, like, having these people around us and such a simple thing like talking about it, and you started on a path to something that you have built greatly, and you've helped so many women, I'm sure, so many families that have come to you.
I really feel honored to be doing what I do. Because I have that, I'm a natural entrepreneur and I am very driven. I realize now that I was selling suckers in fourth grade and making cookies, and now and later we were selling illegally at school. Like, I've always done things like this, and I think I inherited that from my grandfather. He was kind of a scrapper growing up in the Depression and figured things out. He even sold the most newspapers he'd ever sold on the day the Titanic sunk, and that he was so happy that ship sunk for that reason. And we always thought, that's a little backwards, Grandpa. Um, but he lived to be 102 or 103, and I just remember growing up with his stories, and that's just how I've always been. So having something to having my passion, and then figuring out the entrepreneurial skills to go with that, I think I've grown my birth business a little different than most people grow it. Because I have the passion of wanting to help, but I also know we have to reach more people. And the way to do that is through social media and video and all of those kind of things, because we have to get to people like as they pee on the stick, if not before. And when you can get them early and they can start addressing their fears, their births can be absolutely a life experience instead of a medical event.
Absolutely. And your social media is outstanding. Like, you've really taken that. Do you have any tips or tricks or suggestions as far as that part goes, is building businesses and social media?
It has been fun to grow. I study a lot with Gary Vee, who I know you know. And basically, the bottom line is you just have to start doing it. With social media, that's where my families are. That's the age range. That's, they're growing their families, whatever gender, that's where they are. And social media is a really good way for them to get to know you and connect and ask their questions and feel comfortable with you. My goal is not to put my birth classes online. I want to put bits of information so that they find local birth classes so they get the community. And social media is where that starts. They can get to know you, and then they can get to know who the best midwives are around you, and who the best doulas are, and who the best providers are, who are the best docs, where are the best hospitals that have the lowest C-section rate. And that's more important to me, is building mini communities around the world, and especially in America, because you need that community to raise your babies, and you need that community to birth well. Me putting something online that's teaching you tips and tricks about birth is not giving you hands-on connected face-to-face stuff. And we have amazing educators in every part of the United States, and where they aren't, they need to be built. So that's how we should network, and we can do that with social media. I know a lot of people take it as a very competitive market, and that doula is doing more than me, or that midwife's doing, and that's dumb. There are enough babies for everybody. Everybody's having sex. That's never going to change. And the worse it gets politically, the better it is for babies, because we just keep having more. There are plenty of babies, plenty of births. The goal should be, how do we reach these families with evidence-based information so that these babies come into the world with trust and safety and feeling welcome and warm? Because those birth experiences shape their personality and the way they function in the world for the rest of their lives. And we don't need them to have to heal the way we have to heal if we can start really early. And that starts at conception. How are we baking them? How are we taking care of our fears during pregnancy? Because that's transferring right to that baby. So the more education we have earlier and the better community we have even before we get pregnant, everything gets sexier.
Absolutely. It's so important. Like, I think back to before I had kids. I have 3 kids and I have a large gap. My oldest is 14, and then I have an 11-year-old, and then I have a 2-year-old. And the first two, I didn't know anything other than when you get pregnant, you go to the OB. They do what they do. You just listen to them. They tell you what to do. Then you go to the hospital when it's time. Like, you'll feel the contractions. As soon as the contractions start, you need to start heading to the hospital. I pushed it off a little bit because I really don't like hospitals. And I was like, I waited until I was about 4 or 5 minutes apart. I didn't even tell anybody. Like, my water didn't break. I waited until I was about 4 or 5 minutes apart. And I was like, it's time to go. And that's the other thing, breaking of the water. With my first two, they broke my water. I didn't know that, like, they don't have to break your water. Like,
You have an option.
yeah, you have an option. It will happen on its own. The third baby, we had a home birth with a doula in the water and with a midwife. And it was so much easier, so much more relaxed. And it's amazing. You can tell the difference between the two. Like, my older two, it's almost like they're a little anxious. Like, you can tell, like, the quick demand and all of that. Like, I felt during their births, like, it felt like I was just like on a production line. Like,
Kind of
we'll get you
pressure.
in. Yes, we'll get you in. We're giving you an IV. This has meds. It's going to make it go faster. Let's pop your water. It'll make it go faster. Now push. It's over. And with the third baby, everything was calm and chill. I got to do what I wanted to do, walk around, take a bath, let the midwife know. The doula showed up. She was like, all right, it's time to start pushing. Midwife showed up. Baby came right back in my bed. Had skin on skin. Daddy had skin on skin. He jumped in the pool. It's kind of funny. Like, we giggle about it because you can see in, like, the pictures behind, like, him dressing the baby for the first time is his wallet's laid out because he forgot to take his wallet out of his pants when he jumped in the water. So he jumped in the pool and fully clothed with his wallet in. Luckily, his phone was not in there. And so it's kind of funny. You see all the pictures of his wallet laid out. But my third child is so much more relaxed and has such a calm personality. You can tell the difference. It's crazy.
Well, and I think our perception of home birth is that it's scary and it's only hippies. And it's actually safer for a low risk woman to birth at home with midwives. We do it all over the world. And the countries that have more midwifery than OBs have higher rates of survival for moms and babies, better outcomes, and it is a little more chill. They use OBs when there's an emergency or when it's necessary to call them in. And here, that's just how we've set up our obstetric care. It's how we've set up doctors. It's how we've set up the hospitals. I just watched a really good movie, and I can send it to you so you can link it in your information on how the hospitals were set up, laid out, and how it was meant to be a production. It really is a conveyor belt, kind of pump them in, get them out. The problem is it's not an arm surgery where it could be that way. Birth takes on a whole other thing because it's a natural process. And if our minds are stressed, our body shuts down because we're protecting our young, because that's what mammals do. And the birth environment needs to be safe and calm and private and warm and dark so that a mammal can give birth well there. And we can do that at a hospital, but it takes planning, it takes collaboration, it takes developing a team when you get there and knowing what kind of the system is before you get there. I think that was the one thing that we eventually added to our course curriculum, was we needed to add in evidence-based information and the hospital words, so that families were prepared when induction, augmentation, there's a million words that can pop up, Pitocin, breaking of the waters, the AROM, all those big words that are really not, there's not that many of them, but families, once they understand them and what the ramifications are with the different things, then they can actually choose yes or no, instead of, all right, you know best. You know, why in maternity healthcare do we just nod and say they'll do everything? I was doing the exact same thing. Go to the hospital, they'll numb me from head to toe, they'll do the thing. My RN friend across the street was going to be my doula. She said, I'll make sure I keep hitting that button for you. You'll be so numb. And it sounded amazing to me because I was scared of it. And even if I am numb, or I can numb a birthing person from the head down, like completely numb them, if their brain is still scared, that cervix is not going to let that baby out. Nope, because why would I let my baby into an unsafe environment? The mammalian brain will hold that baby back until we get rid of that fear, or we do other means to have that baby out by a belly birth. And if women could talk about the fear and understand where it came from, sometimes it comes from their own birth, and they need to process that it was their mom's fear, not their fear, or all the stories that they heard growing up, or all the stories that we've heard from all of our friends who had 200,000-hour labors, and this went to this, and then it went to this, and it's just get the drugs because it was so bad. And I'm always like, but have you heard about those women who've had absolutely beautiful births and they haven't felt pain? And when they did, they had coping techniques, and their baby was tucked in the right position and everything moved pretty smoothly. Like, we have so many tools now. Like, we have spinning babies classes, and we have doulas, and we have the rebozo that we can use, and we have old time technology in modern times that can actually bring about beautiful, smooth, slick births. And even if they don't, because maybe that baby is too big, or maybe, a complication comes up or something like that, we still have the choice to choose to feel calm and safe, because we've made the choices ahead of time to get in with the right provider, have the right support, and have a beautiful birth. Because this baby gets a one shot. And the only thing we can actually own is our labor, because the baby really is dictating how it's going down. They're the extra third party in the situation, and we can plan and we can prepare. But at the end of the day, this baby knows where my air supply is, where the placenta is, how I need to tuck to get out, or if I'm even going to tuck and get out. It's literally their choice. And we have to be able to go with the flow of that. That's why our birth plans, when we teach them, are one page, and they're all about the baby. You're a grown human being. If you want to eat a big salami sandwich, or a big burrito, because that's what we eat in San Diego for birth, a big carne asada burrito in labor, you can do that. You're a grown woman. If you want to birth upside down, go ahead. You're a grown woman. If you want to labor in a different position, you're a grown woman. You have the option to do all of that, because we're free to do that. But your baby needs your advocacy. Do you want them skin to skin? Do you want them getting shots right away, or do you want those postponed? Do you even want shots? Some states you can waive them, some you can't. Do you want bottle fed, nipple fed, formula fed? Those are all advocacy choices for your baby, knowing ahead of time what you prefer them to have, but also going with the flow if they need something different is very important, because that keeps you calm, which keeps baby calm.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was amazing. Some people don't think about that. I didn't think about that until the last one either. And it's important to know that we have a choice, and to educate yourself. Like, all the baby books and stuff, they don't really, all those first baby books that they always like suggest or give you, they don't inform you of these things.
No, and a lot of them are fear-based. This is what's going to happen, and this could happen, and this could happen. They're terrifying. And one of the number one books that I am recommending now is for all of my birthing families to read is Labor Like a Goddess. because she helps you work through your fears as or they, I should say, there's two women that wrote the book. They help you work through your fears and conversations you need to be having and things you need to be thinking about for postpartum, which we do not give enough information and education on in this country. And that's a huge part. That's probably the biggest part. The labor and birth is easy. The postpartum is, it'll kick your butt. And we need to plan ahead of time for that. There's Ina May Gaskin's Guide to Childbirth. There's Sherry Manelli's book on Journey into Motherhood that has a lot of really positive birth stories. You're going to pick up different tools about birth and how women have birthed through centuries in those books that are going to start to shift your mindset. Birth is not a medical event. It's a life experience, and it can be so amazing. And you always have choice around all of it. The books that are the fear-mongering ones are the ones that doulas use to start bonfires at the beach. Like if we see a mom with one of those, we're like, hi, can I borrow that book forever? And we'll just shred those pages. And I don't really believe in burning books, but those kind, there's some that are really scary. And there's really good ones for partners too. Men, Love, and Birth by Mark Harris is wonderful to help prepare the partner. And it is male-centered, so I will say it's for dads. It's way male-centered, although any partner is going to get good information out of it. But we do have to start shifting our focus, and we do have to start really getting serious about the underlying cause that cesareans are done way too much in this country. And our lack of information during the birth process can slide us into one of those. And cesareans, or belly births is how we refer to them because they're still a birth, are necessary in some cases. They really are, but not in 35% of the cases. Mm-hmm. 1/3. And in some hospitals, it's a lot more than that. That's just our national average. One of the reasons we created our online class that's free is to kind of shed light on that. If you have information about who your provider is, what your hospital's cesarean rate is, what their medical mindset is, and what their belief system is about your body and how things can work by themselves without intervention, it makes a huge difference in whether or not you choose induction or say yes to it if it's being bugged, and forced upon you, or reminded, or even just scheduled without, any kind of conversation. You always have a say in your healthcare. And it's, kind of your job to find those kind of providers in your area. And that's where the local birth communities help, because as doulas, we know who the good providers are. We know which hospitals we don't have good experiences at. We're seeing it every day. And just looking at the hospital that has the prettiest foyer does not necessarily mean you're going to have a beautiful experience there.
Absolutely. Is there any women in your life that empowered you that you look up to?
Oh my gosh. So many within the birth community. Honor Verwal from wombtoworld.com. Amazing. Ina May Gaskin, one of the world's leading midwives. Robin Lim. There's so many in the birth world, in the entrepreneur world, obviously Oprah, Brene Brown, so many. I am a reading fanatic, not only with self-help kind of books, but entrepreneurial books. Tasha Silver has an amazing book on It's Not Your Money. It's Not Your Money anyway. Why can't I think of the name of it right now? But it's really good about energy exchange and how to build your business while still holding your integrity. You're a badass at making money. There's just so many great authors and good women. Jen Sincero, if you want to listen to that on Audible, is hilarious. And it's a really fun book. And it also helps you rework those mindsets around money that need to happen in order for you to, if you don't have a successful business, you can't reach more people. And yes, that's the bottom line. It's okay to have successful people, especially when you have a holistic, loving, intuitive-based business, because that's how you're going to reach more families. So.
Absolutely. Thank you for those suggestions. Those definitely have to look into those. Is there a time that you felt most empowered?
My birth.
I was going to say that sounded like that was the key one right off the bat when you explained it, that in birth is such an empowering moment anyways, but you had such a wonderful journey and such an empowering story about it.
I'm grateful for it because it could have been really traumatic. And I work with families all the time that their first birth, they just thought, they'll do it. They know everything. And then they had trauma on trauma on trauma, and then went into the fourth trimester with even more trauma. And now they're coming to me going, I don't even know I'm pregnant. I'm so scared. I'm terrified. And they want a new experience. And that's the reason that we teach. That's the reason all of us teach, because we're trying to prevent trauma and show you that it can be different. But we have to be willing to be uncomfortable a little bit, look at our fears. And we think that medicine will just take care of that. And it won't take care of the fears. We still have them. And in order to be good families that are solid, that can learn new things, we need to be vulnerable and face those things that are uncomfortable so that they become comfortable. I think one of the things we don't do in America is we don't talk about death, and we hide our children from that. And we don't talk about birth, and we hide our children from that. And those are the exact same thing. They're entry or exit. And birth can be an entry and exit. And that's everybody's biggest fear. Then why aren't we talking about it? We're going to help as a community get you through that if that happens. And a lot of us have had losses. And that's why we don't talk about it, because we can't have it again. It can't happen again. I can't bond with this baby. But we're doing that baby a disservice because they're choosing to stay. They're like, hi, like, love me. And we're terrified. So just whatever it takes to get this baby out safely. Once again, baking them in fear and not taking action with our maternal health, because we're giving all those decisions to somebody else, a third party that's not going to have to live with the consequences. We and our babies have to live with those consequences. It's important that we figure that out.
Absolutely. And you know your body better than anyone also. And so giving it to a third party who may see you for 10, 20 minutes at each appointment, like, you
Yeah,
know.
10-20 minutes is a long appointment, actually. It's usually 3 to 4. Fast.
I was giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, depending on which doctor you see.
Yeah. But it's so important, and it can be so hurtful, like having miscarriages or, you know,
Or stillbirths, or
stillbirths.
just infertility in general. There's a lot wrapped up in that.
And unfortunately, those things really, really don't get talked about. And it almost feels like sometimes women are shamed for those things because it's your body and, you know, you must have done
Something wrong.
something wrong, but you didn't.
Right. And that's another connection piece, because we're not talking about it. We're not healing from it. And we're
Yes.
burying it. And then all of a sudden it'll come out, you had a miscarriage, so did I've had 2. And then we are so connected in so many different ways, but we don't share our full story. And we're embarrassed, we're ashamed. And especially when it comes to sex, well, I shouldn't have been having sex, and that's why I lost that baby, and or whatever.
Yes.
And that's more shame and more mistrust and more lies that we're propagating and giving our children, because we're not open and vulnerable and honest. And it's, even if we're ashamed about it, why aren't we talking about that so that we can be unashamed? Maybe we're making different choices now. Be proud of that we're making different choices now, but don't hide the fact that it happened, because your womb carries that.
Yes. It's so important. Like, that's one thing that we all need to work on together, is bringing that out, the from the miscarriages to postpartum too, postpartum depression, and knowing what to do in that third or that fourth trimester. um it's just not talked about. And then, like, I remember most of the stuff that unfortunately I think I learned when I was younger, it was all on like TV and movies, because it wasn't talked about. Sex wasn't talked about. Babies wasn't talked about. Those so important life-changing moments were not so out there, and it's definitely something that everybody needs to put out there more.
Yeah. And that's one of the beautiful things about Instagram. You can follow a hashtag. and start seeing beautiful water births and birth center births and midwifery births, and figure out what a doula is. And you can look in your local area and see what's going on. I mean, we take that for granted, and you can follow postpartum hashtags and see what mistakes women have made so that you don't make them, and what kind of support around them they found so that you can find that support. And that's one of the number one reasons to find a local birth educator. They know where the nursing support groups are. They know the best docs. They know who can support you afterwards. They know the best therapists if there was something traumatic. They know the best chiropractors and acupuncturists and all the hippie things you think you might not need, but then you might need. It's local educators that are going to help you get to all of that, local birth workers. It's so important that everybody starts to build community within community.
Absolutely. And continue to build community, because we're always changing and evolving and going on new journeys. And there's a community for each one of those sections. And you can definitely learn a lot in those communities.
Super important.
Yes.
Do you have how we're empowered? Education can over-empower us because we think we know everything. But then especially when we start looking at birth, women who have been doing it for a long time can really help you put all those little pieces together that you've collected from Instagram and Facebook and a book you read and a class you took. Once they kind of slot it in, you get the full picture. You're like, oh, and then you can make informed choices. It's crucial to having a beautiful experience.
Absolutely. Do you have words of advice for a younger generation?
Oh, get educated. Like, talk to people who've had beautiful experiences instead of only listening to the negative ones. And that goes for business, that goes for birth, that goes for everything. Why would you listen to all the negative stuff if that's not what you want? You will gravitate towards what you're filling your mind with and your heart with. Always look towards what you want instead of what you're scared of, because that's how you overcome it and get to what you want.
Absolutely. And last, do you have an inspirational quote you use?
Oh my gosh. I have so many. I think the biggest one that it was actually my best friend. She died when I was 18, and it's something that we said all the time. The only difference between stepping stones and stumbling blocks is the way that you use them. And we always pictured, because I grew up in Utah, these rocks that went over a river, and that rapid river rushing through, ice cold water, glacier water coming through. And you could use them as stepping stones, or you could just say, whoa, that's too big, that's too deep, I can't do it. And I find that no matter what shows up in your life, because now I'm a single mom, I'm raising the two kids. Angie's 23 now, so I don't really raise her anymore. And I'm a business owner, that when something shows up, I immediately have to change my perspective on, okay, how am I going to get across this? Instead of, oh, there's a wall, I'm screwed. You have to start changing your perspective. And I think that's what hypnobirthing did for me. It started shifting the stumbling blocks of I can't into, oh, what if I can? And just that much possibility shifts everything.
Absolutely. And finding a different perspective on it too, like just flipping the script, because we can do things. We are powerful, and we just don't give ourselves enough credit or get enough credit for the things we do.
Right. And we probably hang out with people who say, yeah, you're right, you can't. Why the heck are we hanging out with people that say that about us?
Absolutely.
Like, up your game. And you'll find that once you start upping your game, you start losing friends and your community starts to shift. Because when you find a community that supports one another, people that are negative can't hang in that community. And that's just the reality of it. I hardly have any friends before I came into birth work still.
Yes,
like
absolutely.
just shifts things, and that's okay, because if you're up leveling your game, you need your friends to up level too. So
yes. Well, that concludes my podcast. Thank you for being on my show.
thank you.